Hello everyone, and welcome to today's webinar event brought to you by AuditNet. I'm Jim Kaplan, the founder of AuditNet, and I'll be moderating this event. Serving the global audit community, AuditNet is the primary online resource for auditors to share resources, tools, and experiences. AuditNet has been at the forefront of websites dedicated to promoting the use of audit technology and works with partners to offer high-quality web-based training for auditors and finance professionals. We're pleased to welcome Arbutus and one of their clients, ATCO, to present Building and Striving for Audit Analytics Excellence. Arbutus is a pivotal partner for audit teams who see strong analytics as a key factor in their success. Arbutus capabilities simplify and support analytics at every stage. Their applications deliver the very best in data analytics and automation technology to meet the requirements of today's auditors, business analysts, and fraud investigators. Thousands of active users in over 60 countries rely on Arbutus to enhance testing, analysis, and compliance capabilities. Analyzer and Arbutus technology is known to be scalable and user-friendly. It integrates easily with the complementary tools you use today and connects to virtually any data source. Data analytics is reshaping the audit landscape. Today, a team from ATCO will share their experience and the practicality and cost-saving features that data analytics has brought to many companies who have adopted the technology. I'll now turn the floor over to Josephine Naicker from ATCO, who will share with you her background and experience and introduce the other presenters for today's webinar. Josephine?
Thank you, Jim. My mantra is that data holds the answers to many of our global problems and issues. Much of my studies of late has had a focus of data analytics. You will also see that my special interests are robotic process automation and also the cloud security in the cloud, which I think is extremely relevant currently. As a professional, I also believe that it is very important for us to pay it forward. And that is why I think it's very important for us to invest in the industry, which we are attempting to do today. Just a small caution to the community that's listening. If in the future you are traveling and you look at the pilot and the pilot looks similar to me, it could be because my current hobby is becoming a pilot. And that's just a caution. It is a pleasure and an honor for me to introduce my team to you. Up first is Nizar Punjani, a seasoned auditor with over 20 years of experience in audit. He is a senior internal auditor and part of the team responsible for embedding data analytics into our audit projects. He has a keen interest in automating procedures to gain efficiencies for business, which he will share one of those areas with you today. Thank you, Nizar. Next up is Cameron Ollenberger, who brings with him 18 years within the assurance field. Cameron's journey has seen him on various roles within internal audit. He is currently a valued member of ATCO Internal Audit, where he is also a senior internal auditor. His interest in data analytics has led him to be part of the team that developed a segregation of duties tool for ATCO, which is currently in the process of being tested and handed over to business. Thank you, Cameron. Colleagues, my team and I are grateful that you have taken the time to share our journey of embedding data analytics in our internal audit shop. The value that we endeavor to bring to you today is to share with you what we consider to work for us. During our presentation, you may hear us refer to DA. Just so that you know, we affectionately refer to data analytics as DA. We will share with you how we planted and nurtured this vision of embedding DA in the way we do business by focusing on our people, by ensuring that process changes are supported, and also how technology was integrated into this process. We will take you through 2 use cases where we have utilized analytics, after which we will close off by sharing our hopes and plans for the future, including, and wait for this colleagues, this you don't want to miss, sharing with you a recording of the full automation of duplicates payments testing. So stay tuned. We cannot begin this journey without mentioning our founder. ATCO was founded in 1947 by a father and son team renting 15 utility trailers in the Calgary area. From humble beginnings started this mighty company that we today are proud to call home. The heart and mind of ATCO is excellence, a virtue that has been embedded by our founder, Ron Southern. And this key pillar drives us to go beyond the call of duty, to do more than others expect. ATCO has many capabilities. This is a visual of ATCO's global presence. Where do our internal audit fit in? Internal audit provides assurance and advisory services to all the companies globally within ATCO. They say the journey of 1,000 miles begins with one step. Colleagues, that first step was taken in 2017 when a dedicated team member was assigned to data analytics. I am sure you will agree with me that we live in exponential times with endless data. So despite internal audits starting to use analytics, this could not be sustained with just one person. Given the global footprint of ATCO and the sheer volume of data, which I am sure that many of my colleagues listening are in a similar position. As many of you will also be aware that if such programs are to be successful, the sponsorship has to come from the very top. That is the leadership of internal audit. That is exactly what was provided my colleagues by Rob Newman, Vice President and Head of Internal Audit. He provided all the enablers for this program to be a success. He recognized and accepted that there was a period of incubation before tangible benefits can be delivered. He also recognized that the road towards maturity is often a multi-year initiative. The image on the right is a coffee mug that was presented to Rob by the internal audit team, bearing the caption, "Data Analytics Rocks." And truly, it rocks under his leadership. I am hopeful, as we continue to share what works for us today, that you will find some valuable takeaways that you can apply within your organizations. There is a multitude of options to consider when delivering analytic capabilities. Who are the ideal people to drive these efforts? How will analytics affect the internal audit processes? What is the right technology to deploy and when? These decisions, colleagues, literally change how we do business. When ATCO moved to Oracle Cloud in 2018, in fact, it is worth mentioning that ATCO was the first taker to move to Oracle ERP in Calgary. As ATCO's focus was shifting from being data generating to data powered, internal audit saw this as a prime opportunity to play a pivotal role in this bold move. As many of you out there will know that when you're moving from a legacy system to the cloud, there's always large data sets. And it was no different for us. Using Arbutus, Internal Audit reviewed this data migration. This review would really not have been possible were it not for analytics. An important step in this journey, as in any new journey, is to define our vision. The Economist covered a story in 2017 speaking about how data is the new oil. Alberta, where ATCO head office is located, is famous for its oil. However, as this article pointed out, data is the new oil. Colleagues, and the best part, data is different from oil, as you don't need to invest in millions of dollars to find, extract, and refine data. All you need is a team that has a burning desire to seek answers from the data. And we at ATCO had this awesome team. In fact, you will hear from two of the members of that awesome team later today. Within our audit shop, we took a decision to put data at the forefront of all our conversations. Fundamentally, we believe that analytics is about delivering business insights and enhancing the way we do audits. Our vision for our analytics programs is to build a sustainable data analytics program that most importantly provides value to management. So colleagues, how then did we embark on fulfilling or attempting to fulfill this vision? Our core strategy is to embed data analytics into internal audit rather than follow a bolt-on approach. We believe that analytics is more effective when delivered as an integrated team. The success of any analytics program can no doubt transform an organization, particularly when they translate to financial benefits, which you will clearly see, colleagues, when we demonstrate today the case of the duplicates payments testing. I will unpack the strategy in further slides, but in summary, our strategy was and is to train the entire team, to rethink processes, and we are not afraid to question processes, to choose the right tool. Colleagues, this is an important one, to have a clear strategy for data management and data access. When I speak later about it, you will see why it is so important. In fact, this is the key that often closes or opens the analytics programs. Think about it, colleagues. If management does not give us access to the data, there is no way, regardless of how good an analytics program we have, that it is going to get off the ground. Another important consideration is we partnered with business to deliver impactful analytics that delivers business insight. For us at Internal Audit, it is no longer an internal audit journey, but an ATCO journey. Front and center, colleagues, our people are at the forefront of our strategy. Ask any IT person what the single point of failure for implementations of new technologies are. And more often than not, the answer will be the single point of failure is people. That is why we resolved that, like many systems, Arbutus is like many systems, and it requires specialist knowledge. It requires people to support the implementation. But we were very mindful that we could not have the expectation that every single member was going to be a subject matter expert. We are also mindful that people do not have the same knowledge. They do not then also have the same interests. But one thing we were sure, we were going to ensure that our entire internal audit team would have extensive training to allow the best chance of success. In early 2019, ATCO partnered with Arbutus, and intensive training, both at the introductory and advanced levels, were provided to all our people within internal audit. This program was led by Janine Haddocks. She's the second from the right, the one with the bunny ears. Thank you, Janine. She's a master trainer at Arbutus. The culture of data globally is really driving operations and decisions on the basis of data analytics. In our pursuit of creating this culture, we have employed many strategies, some of which I will attempt to share with you today. We have included goals within individual performance plans that speak specifically to analytics. One such goal is the number of audits supported by analytics. Another strategy, and really driven by our core value of caring within ATCO, is that we ensure that the culture of learning and sharing these learnings are embedded within the way we do business. We call this sharing is caring sessions. These are monthly sessions where the team come together and share the learnings relating to analytics. This is to ensure, colleagues, that the learnings are not lost. Can I use analytics in my audit? We wanted this question to be the first question when starting an audit. First thought to help answer this question. Colleagues, what do auditors like most? I want you to think about this. This is not a trick question, by the way. What do we all do when we go to conferences? We accumulate pens and notepads. Let's be honest, we all do it. Auditors like swag, cool pens and cool notepads. Up on the screen is our form of swag. Notepads with what we all already know. Data analytics rocks. This acts as a reminder to us to note down any potential use cases that can be explored and any ideas to improve and, more importantly, to critique the analytics program. My dear colleagues, the use of analytics has no doubt changed our processes within internal audit. We have adopted an agile approach to the way we determine which projects are selected. Our internal audit methodologies within ATCO have served us well for decades, but they needed to be updated to incorporate analytics. And the main reason for this is to ensure that we are intentional about using analytics in the entire audit life cycle. While the use of analytics is most mature in the fieldwork area, our adoption rate in the other areas of the audit life cycle are increasing. For the first time in 2019, internal audit utilized analytics within the risk assessment process to feed into our annual plan and 3-year rolling plan by analyzing past projects. We no doubt have a long way to go to increase the adoption rate within internal audits, but this is definitely a step in the right direction. During the planning phase for individual audits, notably in procurement and contract management audits, analytics is being used to drive more targeted auditing by ensuring that auditors focus on areas or population segments with the highest risks. Within our fieldwork, a higher degree of assurance is being obtained as a result of analyzing 100% of the data where possible. Worth mentioning here is that many of you will know that traditionally, when doing or when auditing within the area of IT general controls, this was to a large extent a manual process. At ATCO, Internal Audit, we are now performing analytics to assist us with our IT general controls. How amazing is that? Our reporting phase is also not immune to analytics. We are able to provide more insightful and actionable findings through analytics. By testing the entire population, we are able to report all deficiencies within a specific area. No longer a sample, but all deficiencies, which becomes a real value add to management. Colleagues, our objective within ATCO Internal Audit is to transform ourselves from a traditional judgment-based, sample-driven, manually intensive and reactionary audit process to one that is truly risk-based, continuous and real-time, and colleagues, totally data-centric. Why data-centric? Because the data does not lie. So what is the Agile approach that I mentioned earlier? Simply put, it is a process that allows us to move quickly to make a determination of whether or not to use analytics. Colleagues, I am sure you will agree with me that one of the biggest challenges faced to get an analytics program off the ground, and more importantly, sustained, is to transform the buzzword of analytics. And yes, after so many years of using analytics, it is still a buzzword in certain organizations. To transform this buzzword of analytics into a tangible centerpiece, a win for internal audit that can be seen and is repeatable. Now here is the paradox that many of you are fully aware of and is probably facing in your own organizations. Internal audit has limited resources in terms of hours and people. And yet, to stand up a successful data analytics program takes time. We acknowledge this. We acknowledged that in order for us to choose the correct projects, extra time had to be allocated to consider the use of analytics. We call this Data Analytics Playground. Seems like an odd concept, and you would be forgiven, colleagues, for questioning. Really? Time to play in internal audit? Well, we took a page out of Carl Jung's book, who interestingly enough was a Swiss psychiatrist whose focus was on analytical psychology. He said, "The creation of something new is not accomplished by intellect, but by the play instinct." Being auditors, of course, we had to change it a little bit. We needed the intellect, but we also said, let's consider the play aspect. So what is our playground? Our playground is a safe place where the potential of use cases can be explored with adequate time and tools provided. This ensures that while the team has adequate time to consider the use of analytics for projects, valuable internal audit hours are not lost on projects. So for projects that are not feasible or is going to take too much of time, this assists in that decision making. The rules of the game are simple. Number one, consider analytics for every project. Number two, document no-go or go decisions. So these are the steps that we follow. Scope and plan, obtain and validate, perform the analysis, and interpret and report. Normally at the interpret and report phase, That is where we are most excited, because that then means that we have successfully used data analytics in a project. We are also mindful that many of the times the data will not be as clean as we will wish it to be. Therefore, we take a decision of whether the effort to actually assume the role of what we call a data janitor is whether we should be doing that. And if we decide that the data is not clean enough for us to do an analysis, we then stop. The final stage, as I mentioned, is really where the true celebrations happen. At this stage, visualization tools like Power BI are considered. As we are very aware that good visualization not only present a visual interpretation of data, but it also improves communication and decision-making for management. In my introduction, I alluded to the importance of this area, often overlooked in many analytics programs, data management. Colleagues, let's not fool ourselves. Data belongs to data owners and not internal audit. We all know the phrase from the Internal Audit Charter that says, and I quote, "Internal audit has unrestricted access to all functions, records, property, personnel, files, and data." It's there in our Internal Audit Charter. We chose not to waive the Internal Audit Charter at management, but rather to take a softer approach to assure management that we are adequately protecting their data. How did we do this, colleagues? By assuring management that we have adequate controls during the entire life cycle of the data when it is within our care. From extracting the data off the system, to transporting the data, to analyzing it, storing it, or sharing it, and even when we are purging the data. Our data management strategy aims to provide assurance to management that their data is safe in our hands. Given that this data is now stored in the cloud, internal audit, and I'm sure this is not only an issue that is faced by ATCO internal audit, but globally, it becomes important for internal audit to make an added effort to try to understand these new risks that now exist in the cloud. As if this wasn't enough, an added complexity that cannot be ignored by all of us is that when operating globally as ATCO does, internal audit has to perform due diligence to ensure compliance with the relevant laws. Example, our privacy laws within the different geographic locations. Colleagues, we all understand and appreciate that data obtained from the source system is always best. Arbutus has the capability to connect directly to the source data. That is production data. Herein lies the blessing and the curse. What a blessing to connect directly to the data. Imagine, well actually we at ATCO don't have to imagine because we now connect directly to the data. We no longer have to wait on business to provide us with reports and raw data from the system. Herein lies the curse. Remember, we are now analyzing live data or working with live data. And the last thing internal audit wants is to pose any security or performance issues to the enterprise systems as a result of our analytics program. So how did we mitigate this risk? And how do we continue to mitigate this risk? We ensure that prior to connecting directly to the data, we test and test and test. We test out all the different scenarios, both with business and with IT. We have currently implemented the Active Directory connector, which, as I've mentioned earlier has allowed us to streamline our our IT general controls testing. We will continue to install other available connectors, example the ServiceNow and the SAP, which we are currently testing. Which leads me into a discussion of technology and how it has been integrated into internal audit's workflow. You will notice, colleagues, that I spoke firstly about people and processes. This is to highlight, in my opinion, in our opinion as ATCO Internal Audit, that these two components, people and processes, are much, much more important than the technology aspect, especially when we talk sustainability. This is a snapshot of the current state of how internal audit has integrated the technology piece. Our software of choice, as you can see in this circle in the center, is Arbutus. We are currently extracting data directly from the source where possible. IT has assigned adequate roles to internal audit within Oracle to allow unfettered access to all data within Oracle. My awesome team members will unpack further in their use cases how this ability to extract data directly from the system has advanced our analytics program. This data is then normalized within Arbutus. My team awesome will again further detail specific examples of how normalization of the data was performed for both these use cases. This data, after being normalized within Arbutus, is analyzed using either some of the built-in procedures, what Arbutus refers to as smart apps, or scripts that we continue to write from scratch. In some cases, this entire process has been automated, and you will see that with the duplicates payments testing, which is fully automated. Currently, colleagues, we have a combination of ad hoc tests and automated tests with a goal to move into continuous auditing in the future. Visualization, as I've already mentioned, is a key consideration for internal audit when presenting results to stakeholders, and Power BI is just one of the tools that we currently use. Our partnerships with finance and IT departments has allowed us to provide insights-driven auditing. This approach of auditing provides more value as it better addresses business issues and risks by providing valuable insights to management. The benefits that internal audit has realized in a short space of time has been phenomenal. Top of that list is the value that internal audit has brought to management, which has no doubt contributed to the increase in the reputation and credibility of internal audit. Management is able to use the work from internal audit to make better decisions. The segregation of duty tool, which Cameron will speak to, has now been passed on to business to own, and this tool is now being used as a control or a monitoring tool by business. Another benefit, colleagues, is that there is an increased interest from business on what future benefits they can derive from analytics, which presents more opportunities for internal audit to provide value to business. The ability to analyze 100% of the data is powerful. This capability, colleagues, has allowed us to provide increased assurance to management and the governance structures within ATCO. For my colleagues out there who are in internal audit, you will know that there is an expectation, whether we like it or not, that external audit should be placing reliance on portions of our work. This has great benefits for the organization as a whole, since one of the benefits of increased reliance on the work of internal audit may equate to reduced external audit fees. There are various factors that external audit consider when deciding on the scope of or extent of where to place this reliance. Using analytics has gone a long way to increase the adequacy of our scope, and we have seen a noticeable increase in the reliance placed on our work. Jack be nimble, Jack be quick. Sorry colleagues, I have forgotten the rest. But what we are and the benefit that we've derived from data analytics is that it has really made us faster. Improving our access to data and developing key insights to data before the fieldwork starts has allowed us to focus on high-risk areas, which has no doubt made us faster while ensuring quality. Most importantly, colleagues, we have seen an increase in team motivation. The efficiencies brought about by data analytics has allowed us to focus on more important tasks. The most important one to mention is that extra cup of coffee. I will now hand over to Nizar to take you through an example of how internal audit has saved business many dollars through the use of analytics. A fun fact about Nizar is that he has a passion for the game of cricket and plays for the Strathcona Cricket Club in Edmonton, where he is the vice captain. So over to you, Nizar, to bowl us over.
Thank you, Josephine. Your thoughts were phenomenal and always keep us motivated, agile and energetic in our data analytics drive. So in this section of the webinar, I will briefly share ATCO's journey on accounts payable duplicate testing and how internal audit utilized on the opportunity that came our way. I will also share a few examples of duplicate invoices that could be processed by any ERP system and remain undetected. I will also show what functions of Arbutus are used to normalize the invoice number field. There will also be a very brief introduction on the duplicate testing automation process, and then my closing remarks with lesson learned and way forward. So at ATCO, it all started with a management request. When some invoices were entered twice because of the ingestion method used by management. During Oracle Cloud implementation, management had to terminate all the invoices in the old version of Oracle, which was on-premise, and then re-ingest that in the new cloud version. What management told us that they used an Excel-based data loader program to re-ingest all the terminated invoices. However, as we all know that with Excel, care needs to be taken when zeros are used. What I meant here is numeric field versus character field. And because of that error, all the leading zeros were dropped off when the invoices were ingested by management by using the loader program. But what we did within our internal audit team, and that's the interesting part, that we accepted management request and thought that by using Arbutus Analyzer and by using a few functions within it, we can normalize the invoice number field and could possibly detect those duplication. However, we went one step ahead and we decided to expand the scope. And we included the emerging concept in data analytics called fuzzy matching in our testing, which might be more interest for you. We thought that there might be chances of more errors other than leading zeros, which may have remained undetected by management. And why we were thinking of those errors, you might be thinking, because we knew that management for invoice payment normally use an ingestion tool that reads the invoice number through optical character recognition, OCR tool, which has its own limitation. We also knew that in some cases, invoices were also ingested manually by account payable clerks to clear off the backlog that was created during the Oracle implementation, which does not happen in normal circumstances. We embarked the journey and used a period of 7 months for our testing, which included a couple of 100,000 of invoices and magnitude in billions of dollars across 10 business units within ATCO. So how did we use Arbutus to analyze this information? First, we had to identify what data was required in order to perform our analysis, which in this case was pretty simple: the invoice data of the last 7 months. Then the next step were to normalize the data to make sure it was effective for our analysis and to come up with a way to analyze the data. And that's where the fun part starts. That is to normalize the data and to analyze, which I'll show you in my next slides. The last part was reporting our finding to the management. And before I move on to normalization of data, let's involve you guys and let us go through some of the examples of the duplicate testing that we encountered in our data. And then I will explain which of the Arbutus functionalities were used to normalize the invoice number field. We will go clockwise, starting from the one that is on the right-hand side top corner. As you would see that the first one has a dash in between the numbers. This could possibly be due to an OCR error or human error. The next one is a classic example where the issue was related to uppercase versus lowercase of the alphabet involved in the invoice number. Again, this could happen because of an OCR error or human error. You can see in the next one, which is at the very bottom in the diagram, that there was an additional empty character at the beginning of the numbers in the invoice, and the space is considered a blank character. The next one is linked to the leading zero scenarios where the 2 zeros at the front of the invoice number were dropped off when the Excel loader program was used, which was the request that came from management, as I explained at the beginning. And last but not the least, the example which is on the top left corner, there was an empty character in between the alphanumeric characters in the invoice number. This again could be due to an OCR error or human error. And you guys would appreciate the fact here that all of these examples which I shared above were actually processed by the ERP system and remain undetected, as because of some additional characters, they look different to ERP and therefore they were processed. As I mentioned, the fun part was to normalize the invoice number field. And now I will explain what functionalities of Arbutus Analyzer were used to normalize the invoice number field so that it can be detected as a duplicate payment. First, I used computed field command to add a field and then used a few functions to normalize the invoice number field. As you can see from the screenshot on the top left corner, that I created a new computed field and named it C_invoices, which I normally use for any computed field added by a letter C. And then I use allTrim function on the original invoice number. What allTrim does, that it removes the leading and trailing blank characters. One could also use ltrim function for removing blank characters from the left side and trim function to remove blank characters from the right side. However, important to note here that blanks inside the character strings cannot be removed by using allTrim. I then used include function. What include does, that it returns a variable length string by including only the characters that you would specify. For example, as you would see that I wanted to include only numbers to remove either blank characters or other characters from the invoice number field, and that's why I used include function to include only numbers between 0 to 9. As you would notice that I used the function in layers, means I used the previously calculated normalized field which was by using all trim as my invoice number when I used include function. I also used proper function, which converts alphabetic characters in a string or field to mixed case. This was to normalize the invoice number that has issues of either lower or uppercase. And lastly, I used ltrim function to remove zeros from the front. This function was used specifically because we knew that management has done the errors in uploading the invoice when zeros at the front were removed. So once the invoice number field was normalized, I used the duplicate command within Arbutus to detect whether the key fields in the file contain duplicates. The exact duplicate function was used means where all the key fields must have the same value. And what were my key fields? As you can see from the diagram above, they were business units, supplier, invoice date, invoice amount, and the invoice number, but my normalized invoice number which I created after using the function. What does it mean? That duplicate command will pick the instances where there was a same invoice, same date, same amount, same vendor, and for the same business unit. And here the fun parts again begin when we have the results by using Arbutus Analyzer. The last column shows that how by using various functions we normalize the invoice number field, and then by using duplicate commands I was able to detect the potential cases of duplicate invoices. I will now quickly explain the examples here. In the first and second set of examples, you can see that there were some special characters or blank characters in between the numbers in the invoice number field, but both the invoices had same amount, same date, and of course from the same supplier. However, were not detected by built-in preventative controls of either ACR tool or ERP. But by using include function, I was able to remove all the characters other than numbers from 0 to 9, and those instances were detected as potential duplicate cases. Similarly, my favorite one, the third set, which to normal human eye looks same, but actually due to either OCR error or human error, first time the invoice was ingested as lowercase letter L with letter N, and second time it was ingested as uppercase letter L, letter I, and letter N, and therefore were not detected by ERP or OCR tool. However, by using proper case function, I was able to first normalize it to the case, and then by using include function, when I removed the characters and only numbers were left, that was detected as a duplicate instance. And the last one, where the leading zeros was removed, and when the invoice was ingested second time due to the Excel loader error, but when I used ltrim function, the leading zeros from the first invoice were also removed, and after that this set was detected as an instance of duplicate invoice. So when internal audit presented results of the duplicate testing, management got fascinated to see that 47% of the instances were new to them, and that was a real success for us. They were not identified by their own detective control, for example, purchase order threshold or budget versus actual comparison. The three root causes that management identified were the dropping off of leading zeros using the data loader program as they knew from the beginning, the OCR errors, and the human manual data entry errors. As a next step, and to limit the instances of duplicate payment in future, business has requested internal audit to provide assistance using Arbutus to detect duplicate payments more frequently. Given the significance of this area, we have also suggested management to consider performing this review by themselves using Arbutus to move into the direction of continuous monitoring.
We have a number of questions that are coming in, and I'll pass some of those questions along right now. This comes from Kim. On a regular work week, how much time do you and your team spend working on analytics?
Thank you, Jim. That's an interesting question, Kim. Thank you for that. Maybe to say that it really does depend on the project. But Kim, what is important is when we spoke about that, those stepped process that we use to analyze a project and whether that project will be feasible to actually use analytics on, that is really where, what assists us to determine how much time will be spent. So on a regular project, I would say that if analytics, and it's very hard to say because it really depends on, is it a new project? So if it is a new project, it will take much more time, but the hope is that if that project is repeated the next year, it's going to be substantially less time. So I don't think it will be fair for me to just give you, a number, because we're really looking at many new projects. It really is taking a little bit longer, but we're definitely going to get those benefits in future years. Kim, I hope that answers your question. I really couldn't give you a number. Jim, over to you for another question.
Yes, we have another question here. This comes from Courtney. If 47% of the duplicates management was not aware of, what of the other 53% and further fine-tuning of the analytics scripts to reduce false positives? I think this is in relation to Nizar's slides.
Just to clarify one thing here, that the remaining 53% were also cases of duplicate payments. Very few percentage was there which was false positive, but what I meant to say here that management was able to detect the other one by their own detective controls. Sometimes they before every payment run they do their own controls, purchase order threshold as I mentioned. So those were duplicate tests or instances, but 47% were sort of new to them.
Duplicate payments, is this available out of the box, or do we need to do all these coding for the analyzer to work?
So as a starting point, and I will come on to that slide also when I'll speak more about the automation process, that there are standard scripts available on Arbutus data store, and one can start with that particular script to detect or to use for duplicate payment detection, but you would need to tailor it based upon your own data, how your data is configured, how your data fields are there, how your data structure are there, but the starting point is available on Arbutus data store. So before moving into the process of automation of duplicate invoice testing, I would spend some time on highlighting a few common advantages that we get from automation. First of all, it provides documentation of the steps that are required to complete the analysis. And as an auditor, we all love to see the audit trail, which is available with the documentation of these steps. And I'm looking at Josephine, which is smiling by saying that she can review my work if there is a documentation available. Then for multi-step processes like account payable duplicate invoice testing, it reduces the amount of the time required to complete the analysis. Obviously, it reduces the number of clicks for repeatable processes, and resultantly the time to run the analysis is also reduced, as there is a time lag between execution of functions. And lastly, it makes the analysis process repeatable and easy for others to run in future. And later on, I'll share one real example as to how internal audit took the benefit of automation for repeatable tasks. So my first step was to file all the data files which were tagged monthly in a folder with same extension. As you can see from the screenshot, I extracted all the monthly files directly from Oracle Cloud, a point that Josephine already covered in her section of the presentation. And this was my slide, which I already answered in one of the questions, that before starting the automation process, I leveraged on the smart apps that were available on the Arbutus data store. And just for the information of listeners, there are a lot of standard scripts available which one can use as a starting point and then tailor based upon the individual needs. I used a number of commands in the automation process, and without going into much detail, I'll briefly explain a few of them here. I used variable command to hold the value of constant, for example, a file path or file extension. This command was also used to count the number of loops and number of files and to create a loop. I used directory command to produce a directory of files and folders stored on my network drive, as I showed you in my previous slide. The do with while command was also used to create a loop for defining Excel files in Analyzer. And I used import function to individually define my files in Arbutus and later to append them into a consolidated one. And many of you that love to make noodles like I do know that it only takes 2 minutes to cook them. Automation in Arbutus works just as fast. So here is my 2 minutes noodle case for which internal audit team is proud of. So after completing the initial test of accounts payable, the management realized the value that was created for them with the duplicate invoice testing, and requested internal audit second time to run a similar testing on one of their files. The email came to me at 11 minutes past 4 in the late afternoon with a request if we can identify the potential duplicate invoice numbers and provide the results back to management by noon next day. As one would infer from the wordings of the email, that management considered this task as a lengthy exercise which might take some hours to complete. And believe me, my friends, that would be the case if I had to do all the tasks and steps manually. But because I had already automated the process by that time, it took me roughly 2 minutes, which I'll show you in the video that Josephine mentioned, to complete the whole exercise. And at 4:44, after my own review, the results were sent to Josephine for her review. This is the benefit one can utilize because of the automation of the process. And you could have your own noodles ready in 2 minutes. With this, I will end the section of my presentation and will hand over the charge back to Josephine. Thank you, guys.
Thank you, Nizar. Colleagues, stay tuned for the two-minute noodle movie at the end of this presentation. A task that would normally have taken business hours, if not days, with many resources, now takes around 2 minutes. Cameron will now take us through the segregation of duties use case, which I have already mentioned. This tool has not only provided business with comfort around controls, but has also saved business substantial dollars from having to go out and purchase this tool. Over to you, Cameron.
Thanks, Josephine and Nizar. To reiterate the benefits of automation that Nizar just spoke about, I would like to start off by highlighting that our segregation of duties analysis also leveraged the automation features of our Arbutus Analyzer. Like the duplicate testing, the segregation of duties analysis takes numerous clicks to run, and if you were to run through it without automation, it would take up most of your day, with a lot of time spent waiting to execute the next command. With automation, this time was greatly reduced, down to about an hour of machine time, and as a result, you can start it, go do something else, and review the results when the analysis is complete. Before I get into the details of our segregation of duties analysis, let's go to another polling question.
And Josephine, we've got a lot of questions that are coming in, so if you want to prioritize some of these, we can handle them. Otherwise, I'll go ahead and I'll just start reading some of them. The first one I see is from Grace. How do you justify the cost of implementing and using Arbutus internally?
Thank you, Grace. Grace, you will see from the duplicates payments testing, basically we were able to see a lot of savings just from the duplicates testing. So I think it's very important to look for those quick wins, projects that have quick wins, and that management can really then see the value that internal audit has to bring. Because so often when internal audit asks for funding, you know, it's not an easy process. I suppose funding in any department is not an easy process. So I think it would be very important to look for those low-hanging fruits, look for those quick wins where you can exhibit to management that you're saving them money. If you look at the segregation of duties tool that we developed internally, we did a cost-benefit analysis to say to management, if you go out to the market, this is what it's going to cost you. If we're going to do this internally, well, there's a cost, but not as much as going out to the industry. So we need to prove really our salt to say to management, this is the value, this is the dollars that we can save you. I hope that answers your question, Grace. Thank you.
How do we access the Arbutus data store? This comes from Paul.
So if I understand the question properly, so these scripts are sort of built-in available in Arbutus Analyzer, and once you have the license of that Arbutus Analyzer, you can use Analyzer, and those scripts are freely available. One of the top headers, I would say.
Okay, and one more question. This one comes from Julian, and this I believe was for you, Nizar. Would you consider adding supplier bank account as a match field? I found extra duplicates by using this.
So that's a very good point, and when we extended our duplicate testing, especially when we were doing our supply chain audit, yes, we included that. That was part of one of our forensic tests that we did, but it was not covered in this presentation. But yes, that was also done.
All right. So today I'll be providing you with a look into our journey of how we at ATCO used Analyzer to perform our segregation of duties analysis. I'm hoping this walkthrough will provide you with an understanding of the background and our thought process so that you may be able to launch into your own SOD journey using data analytics. So, why did we embark on this journey? In 2018, ATCO implemented Oracle Cloud ERP. The standard functionality of Oracle Cloud did not include tools to identify, monitor, and control segregation of duties risks on an ongoing basis. Therefore, we needed to find a solution to do so. While a segregation of duties module is available from Oracle, as well as other independent third parties, we found the cost of these tools was more than a full-time employee. So back to the question that we had earlier, how do we justify the cost? Here's a perfect example. Therefore, we felt we could come up with a more cost-effective solution. So we decided to try data analytics approach using Arbutus Analyzer. Before I get into the specifics of how we used Arbutus to complete this analysis, let's make sure we are all on the same page and first revisit what segregation of duties are and how Access works in Oracle Cloud so that you're able to understand the analysis. Segregation of duties is a control process that requires more than one person to complete a task or process to limit exposure to errors, fraud or theft, and regulatory and compliance issues. When completing segregation of duties analysis, there are two layers that you must consider. The first is the business layer. The business layer includes the official duties that are assigned to employees. These are usually relatively easy to define and often documented using a process map. The second is the systems layer. The systems layer supports the business layer by providing employees with the access and ability to complete their official duties in the IT systems being used. The problem is, it's not always that simple to just assign the duties an employee should have in the IT system. Access is usually assigned as functionality groupings or role, which usually means a user will obtain some level of access that is in excess of what is required to do their job. Additionally, users can be assigned varying levels of access to functionality, and each user's access can be very different from the next. The security environment of an ERP is also usually very dynamic and in the state of constant change. User profiles can be updated at any time, and incremental access can be added, meaning that access has to be compared on a regular basis. As a result, this creates a risk that duties provided in the systems layer conflict segregation of duties requirements and increase risk to the company. Therefore, all users must be assessed independently of one another and on a regular basis to ensure segregation of duties risks are identified. To dive a little deeper into the systems layer, I'm going to discuss the specific security features of Oracle Cloud. Oracle uses a role-based security which groups together system functions or privileges, as they call them, that are required to complete a specific job into roles that are then assigned to users. So to provide a clearer picture, I've shown a scaled-down version of what this access can look like on the screen. In this example, the user has been assigned 3 roles: Accounts Payable Clerk, Accounts Payable Supervisor, and Supply Chain Specialist. Each of these roles include privileges, as shown in the gray boxes at the bottom, to complete specific tasks within the system. As you can see, by adding multiple roles to a user, they can quickly inherit segregation of duties conflicts. For instance, the Accounts Payable Clerk role allows the user to create an invoice, while the Accounts Payable Supervisor role allows the user to approve it. If the system were to remain static, you could potentially create a matrix that identifies specific roles that could not be assigned together. However, Oracle allows for the creation of custom roles through the assignment of privileges to the role. This adds another layer of complexity to the analysis, as these custom roles could go undetected and may not be added to your matrix. Oops. Therefore, since privileges provide access at the granular level for which duties must be segregated, the analysis of segregation of duties must be completed at the privilege level. Due to the level of data that is involved with an ERP system with thousands of employees in it, this quickly becomes very difficult to analyze manually, and therefore some form of tool is required to aid in this analysis. This is where we turn to Arbutus. So, how did we use Arbutus to analyze this information? First, we had to identify what data was required in order to perform our analysis. Then, we had to normalize the data to make sure that it was effective for our analysis. Next, we had to figure out a way to analyze this data, then create reporting that effectively communicated what we have found. To understand what data we needed, we had to use our understanding of Oracle Cloud's security layer and see if there was any related data readily available. What we found was that Oracle Cloud had an out-of-the-box user data report that included usernames, roles assigned to the user, and the privileges assigned to those roles. So this was something that we could easily access and use for our analysis. Now that we have the user data, we needed something to benchmark this data against. So what we did was create a rule set that defines the privileges that shouldn't be assigned together, such as the creation of an invoice and approval of an invoice, as shown in the example table on the screen. To aid in the creation of this rule set, we used industry best practices to identify functionality that should be segregated, then found those privileges in Oracle Cloud that provide the access to that functionality. After we downloaded the user file, we realized that this file was very large as it contained millions of lines of data. Big data files are hard on CPU resources, and as a result, the bigger the file, the longer it's going to take to complete the analysis. To make this more efficient, remove the data that we didn't care about, such as low-risk privileges. We did this by comparing the privileges in the user file to the privileges in the rule set, and basically removed any privileges from the user file that weren't in our rule set. This effectively reduced our user file from millions of lines down to thousands of lines and greatly improved the efficiency of our analysis. So, how did we do this? We used the join function in our Butis. Sounds a bit strange as we join tables together to reduce the information, but the join function is a very powerful tool that allows you to combine fields from two files into a new file or find exceptions between two files. The join command has several options for matching the data. I've highlighted some of the join options on this slide for your reference. Note that the shaded gray area for each type of join indicates what the output will be. For instance, the matched primary only join will provide a combined file with information from both the primary and secondary file that match. The unmatched primary records only join only includes the fields that were not found in the secondary table. This type of join can be useful when looking for exceptions. The matched primary and all secondary records takes the secondary table and adds fields that are common from the primary table. The many-to-many records join is similar to the matched primary records only join. However, in this instance, it'll match records that appear more than once. Since our data includes multiple users with the same privilege, this is the type of join that was required to complete our normalization exercise. It is also the function that we used for the majority of our segregation of duties analysis. Another feature of the join function is that it allows you to select the fields that you would like to include in your output file. For instance, you can select to include matched records from both files, just the matched records from the primary table, or just the matched records from the secondary table. For the normalized data, we only selected the fields from the primary table as output, as shown by the fields selected in the blue on the screen. This allowed us to reduce the user file to the privileges that matched with the rule set without bringing any of the information from the rule set over to the newly created reduced user file. So now that we have our normalized data to work with, we are now able to analyze the data. So in order to come up with a strategy to do this, we had to ask ourselves two questions. First, if the user has a privilege, let's say create an invoice, what privileges conflict with the create an invoice privilege? And second, if we know the privilege that conflict with the privileges the user holds, how do we verify that the user actually has these conflicting privileges? So to determine what privileges conflict with the privileges the user holds, we again turn to the join function in our Butis to compare the user file to the rule set. As you can see by the diagram on the screen, we use the privilege field as the join key between the two files, and then in our output file combine the results of the tables which I've shown on the next slide. Here you can see the combined information with the user name, role, privilege from the user data source file, and the conflicting privilege added from the rule set. Now, at this point of the analysis, remember, the output table only identifies that this is the conflicting privilege associated with the privilege the user has, as we do not yet know if the user actually has this conflicting privilege. To confirm if the user actually has the conflicting privilege, we need to next complete another join with the user file again. However, this time, the join key will be set between the conflicting privilege in the combined file to the privilege in the user file. The resulting file is a listing of users with the roles they have and any conflicting privileges. In addition to identifying if the user has the conflicting privilege, we have also included the role from which the conflicting privilege is provided, as shown by the table on the slide. While we have an output file that has all the critical information in it now, this file can still be fairly large, especially if this is the first time an SOD analysis has been run on a newly implemented ERP, or if there have been significant changes since the last SOD analysis was run. Therefore, it is important to create effective reporting to help understand the data that you have created. With Arbutus, you can query and summarize data through built-in functionality such as classify, stratify, and summarize, or through customized formula-based functions. At the bottom of this slide is an example of a summary report that identifies the number of users who violated specific rules, which was created using the summarize function in Arbutus. In addition to the reporting that can be utilized in Arbutus, other tools such as Tableau or Power BI can also be leveraged to create visuals and interactive reporting. At ATCO, we utilized Power BI to create reporting that has drill-down functionality. This allows users to start at a higher level, like the one shown on the last slide with the rule and count of users who violate the rule, or like the graphic on this slide, from which they could drill down to see who the users are that violate the rules, and then the specific access those users have. Power BI also makes sharing of these reports easy through the use of their cloud-based dashboards and apps. To conclude, combining Arbutus to complete the heavy lifting analysis and Power BI to provide interactive reporting has allowed us at ATCO to create an effective segregation of duties tool.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you, team. Awesome. So where to from now? Up on the screen, you can see the Gartner's Business Analytics Maturity Model. Look, we definitely want to get to the space where we can look into a crystal ball and predict the future. We're not there currently, but we definitely want to get to that space. I'm now going to hand over the reins to Nizar because he's going to then take you through the automation piece that we spoke about earlier. Just note that all the data has been sanitized because in line with our data strategy policy or procedures, we actually wanted to make sure that we protect all ATCO data. So over to you, Nizar.
Thank you, Josephine. So I hope you all are now ready with your popcorns to watch this video in which I'll show the automation of the accounts payable duplicate invoice testing process in Arbutus Analyzer. You would see that in the data folder I have the monthly invoice files that were tested and which I showed in one of my previous slides. For demonstration purposes here, I only included the files for 2 months, that is January and February 2019. Now I will take you to the Arbutus file that has the scripts for the automation of testing. I created 2 separate scripts. The first one is to define the monthly files into Arbutus to create a consolidated file which will then be used for testing. And with just one single click, the automation process gets started, as you can see in the background. And what happened after this, that as a result, both the monthly files were defined and a consolidated file was created automatically, a process that otherwise would have taken a number of steps to complete. Isn't it cool? I'm now going to run the second script, which will, again with a single click, will normalize the invoice number field in the consolidated file and then use the duplicate command to define all the potential case of duplicate payments. And when I say normalize, means all the functions that I talk about. And here are the results with the file of duplicate payments. I will now export the file and send it to my auditee for further comments or further analysis. Hope you guys have enjoyed this demo. Thanks, and over to you, Josephine.
Thank you, Nizar. Thank you to the organizers for this event, and most importantly, thank you to our virtual colleagues that have joined us today. From my team and I, we wish you well on your analytics journey. Over to you, Jim.
Thank you very much, Josephine. This was an excellent presentation, and I want to thank everybody for their contributions and for asking the questions and for paying attention, and especially thank both Arbutus and ATCO for sharing their this experience for how to implement data analytics and very practical suggestions on how to do that for your organization. We have recorded today's webinar, and you will receive a copy of the recording. If you answered all the polling questions, you will also receive the confirmation email for getting your CPE. That'll take us about 5 to 7 business days to get out to you. And with that, I will close the webinar out. I want to thank everybody for joining us, and you can see the contact information for Josephine, Nizar, and Cameron if you have any questions for them. Otherwise, the questions that we were not able to get to will be answered in a follow-up email directly from the people at ATCO. So thank you all. Have a great day, and we look forward to you joining us again for another webinar in the future. Thanks, and bye.